My hard drive is making a mad dash for the finish line trying to export some Elden Ring for Degenerate Plays, so if you haven't checked out Degenerate Plays, that's our secondary channel. Link is in the description down below. We hang out, play games there. That's neither here nor there, though, my shameless plug aside, because Gotham Knights, it's in some hot water with people. Now, I wanted to wait on this, believe it or not, a couple of days to kind of let it simmer down, get an actual discussion going, get your thoughts on it, and also, I feel like it would just be a bad look for me to jump into the FPS discussion right away with this game and its performance, etc., because I've talked about the good, I've talked about the bad, there's things I'm excited for, things I don't like, and of course, WB copyright striking my channel pissed me off. So I feel like if I had gotten into this right away, it would have been very biased. Before I talk fully about my thoughts on what's going on, I need to just straight up get to the point, which I don't do enough, which is that an official account actually confirmed that this game is going to run at 30 FPS on consoles. It's going to be locked at 30 FPS. Now, hopefully this does not mean that there will be quality dips as well in terms of that, because games like Demon's Souls, despite being one of my favorite games ever, the original Demon's Souls and now the remake, they came out and they had dips below 30 FPS, which at the time was somehow considered acceptable. Nowadays, what's generally considered acceptable is you're trying to aim for 60 FPS for the PS5 and Xbox Series generation. That's kind of what you're aiming for. That's a bit of an industry standard. One problem I do have with this is just the worry that this will be going back to that industry standard of 30 FPS, because they went on to say that it's due to different types of features like providing untethered co-op, a detailed open world, etc. My problem with this is, for me, I guess, just me, I've always preferred better frame rate over better details. That's just me. Once it goes above 60 FPS, I don't feel that way, right? I don't need a 240 FPS game that looks like a potato, but runs at 240 FPS. I don't need that. But what I do like is kind of a middle ground where you hit 60 FPS, the game still looks pretty good, but it doesn't need to look like the best thing ever. And it does seem to me a little bit like they are prioritizing that graphics, right? That side of the whole equation, kind of like how we had the resolution and graphics battle in gaming for a while, where everyone was aiming way higher than machines were capable of, and because of that, the FPS sucked. It does seem to me like they're going that direction with this, where they're going more in terms of visual fidelity and not as much in terms of performance. I've never really cared for that. I prefer performance. But I am going to have some takes on this that I think you won't expect, because for me, this isn't necessarily a deal breaker. There's a lot of really good games that ran at 30 FPS at launch that people loved. And while I do think that this shouldn't really be the case, where it's now at 30 FPS, I would prefer 60. I don't necessarily think that this is going to ruin the game. But despite that, this is a game I have waited for a lot of years. And I think I was one of the few people when the last gen version of this game, so PS4 and Xbox One, when that version was canceled, I talked about it because it made me annoyed. And one of the things I said was that if you are going to cancel this, you better not be held back by that technology then, because it's ridiculous to cancel it 6 months out, right? It's ridiculous to cancel that version like less than a year out from the supposed release at the time. You're basically taking consumers' hype, you're hyping them up over time, and then 6 months out you say, nah, just kidding, you can't buy the game. So I already talked about how that pissed me off. But then I said, that if you develop a game for a previous generation and a current generation, no matter what, you are tying your hands behind your back a little bit on what the game is going to be capable of, because this isn't the days of like the SNES and the Genesis. You don't have different teams making an entirely different version of the game. What you're doing is lowest common denominator hardware work, saying, well, what are the PS4 and Xbox One capable of? And what can they do? Okay, well, how can we make that game, but then improve it for the PS5 and Xbox Series X and make it better? Now, the way that we've seen a lot of that cross-generational stuff where you still have accessibility on last gen, but now you're getting better on the current gen, I guess, or next gen, or whatever you want to call it. I still call it next gen because, let's be honest, most people still can't really easily get their hands on a Series X or a PS5. You can on the Series S. No offense to Series S owners, though, but there's no disk drive. It has more technical limitations than the Series X, so it's kind of a middle ground, right? I guess for me, one thing I talked about with this was if you're going to cancel those versions, you already did the development based on the lowest common denominator tech. And that doesn't mean that tech is stupid. That doesn't mean it's bad or you shouldn't own it. I love playing PS3 games still. They're awesome, okay? But when you do that, that's just what the game is going to be capable of. And I remember at the time people said, Jay, that's not true. Jay, that's not true. They have plenty of time. It must not have run at all. They have plenty of time. It's going to come out on PS5. It's going to come out on Series X. You're going to be proven totally wrong. It's going to run perfectly. It's going to be optimized. It's going to be great because they're going to be devoting that last half a year of development time now just to the one version to make it better. Now, in terms of my overall thoughts, Spider-Man for PS4 was a game that ran at 30 FPS. The Fallout games, when they launched on the 360, PS3, and all those, they ran at 30 FPS. Some of my favorite games run at sub 30 FPS on their native hardware. So, for example, the original Demon's Souls, like I said, I guess to me, this isn't something that ruins the game. This isn't something where if I was pre-ordering and I was super invested and really wanting it right now, it would make me not buy it. But also, you have to think that video games are getting more and more and more expensive. I don't think it helped that yesterday when I'm recording this, so I guess the day before that, on October 15th, there was an official developer account from Rocksteady, which, yes, Rocksteady's not making this game, but it was a Rocksteady developer saying that people were basically whining about this and that it didn't matter that it was 30 FPS and that technically, even though games are $70 now, they should be more money. They should be 90 because of inflation and how like people on Twitter shouldn't have an opinion on this almost. That's what it came off like to me. That kind of stirred the pot even more, made people more angry. So I don't think that that helped. But also, as someone who works my ass off and doesn't make very much money, I do understand the sentiment of feeling like talked down at and feeling like you're working very hard and people are shitting on you all the time on the internet. So I understand that there's that point of view. I just don't think it was a good look on top of this situation already. I have seen a lot of people saying they're canceling their pre-orders, they're not going to get the game. I'm not going to judge that, all right? I had like a more extreme version of that for me. Like I got a copyright strike from WB, like I said before, and they still tried to pimp me out for promoting their game and this and that and the other thing. And I turned down a review copy, said, no thanks, I'm good, I don't care. And also didn't talk about this for a little bit because of that. And I canceled my pre-order because of that. I actually decided not to buy the game at launch because of that. So for me, I already had a more extreme take on that didn't affect anybody else but me, right? So I'm not going to judge you for what kind of game you want to buy if this is a turnoff to you. But to me, I guess, it's a disappointment. It makes me wonder what the point was of the last gen versions ever being in development, because it seems like if they couldn't even get it running at 30 FPS on PS5 and Xbox Series X, was it a PowerPoint slideshow? Like what was going on the previous generation, and why did it even take until this point to cancel it? Because that seems like something you'd find out much earlier in development. Like, oh no, we can't even run this on the best state-of-the-art consoles that are out right now. Okay, well, that probably shouldn't be made for lower than that then. Like, you'd think that would be something you'd determine earlier on. I don't really know what happened there, but I don't think WB does either, since it took up until 6 months before launch to cancel those versions. I'm interested to hear your thoughts down below. Now, does this affect the content of the game? I do think it affects smoothness of gameplay. I do think that there are a lot of people who prefer higher FPS, and that's just more fun to them, the same way different genres of video games are fun to them. And I also do see the argument that if you're paying $70 for this game, or you're paying $70 for another game, and the other game runs better, that's more valuable to you. I do see that argument. I totally understand. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts in the comments down below on what you think about all this. Do you think it'll affect the game? Do you not? Do you even care at this point? I know some of you don't. So let me know. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. And also, really quick before we go, I know some of you have heard a lot of these, but I do want to say real quick that speaking of superhero type adjacent stuff, my wife Jill is working on her resin comic book inspired pieces from saved comic books and repurposed recycled comic book paper over on her website, Enchanted Glamour. That's enchantedglamor.com. It helps us out a lot when people buy stuff. Like I said, I know this is a little whiny. I'm making like no money right now. The economy collapsed borderline. Ads are worthless and nobody wants to watch YouTube. So if you want to support the channel, that helps a lot and means a lot to us. So we appreciate you. Have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shway.